She was the one everyone talked about, the shining light in every family story. From the moment she walked into a room, heads turned, voices rose and eyes followed. She had charisma, confidence, and that effortless way of making everything look graceful, even the things she didn't actually manage. Family gatherings circulated around her laughter and her polished stories. She was the daughter who got straight A's, the niece who was certain to be a CEO someday, the sister who everyone wanted to praise. And all of us, I included, basked in her reflected glow, convinced she was the future we should admire. Growing up, I was the quieter sibling, the one who took notes, read books, and didn't need to be the center of attention. I was content in my corners, the planner behind closed doors, the one who looked at details while she dazzled crowds. I remember being okay with this dynamic for years, loving her success without jealousy because she seemed to have it all. And yet, there was a tiny, almost invisible part of me that wondered what it would feel like to be needed the way she was adored. Little did I know how quickly admiration can drift when the tides of capability change. The shift began, so subtly that most didn't notice it at first. She moved to the city, chasing career dreams and shimmering invitations. Her social media lit up with accolades. We all reposted, liked, and lauded her accomplishments. But then came a promotion she didn't get, a project that missed its target, deadlines she couldn't meet. We saw her smile falter in photos, her tone grow anxious, her words more cautious. Still, we reassured ourselves, even stars have off seasons. We whispered about pressure, about fatigue, about burnout. We didn't let ourselves say it out loud, but the cracks in her armor were visible to anyone who cared to see. And then one evening it happened. An unexpected phone call, not from friends, not from colleagues, from her. Her voice, usually poised and confident, trembled slightly as she said, "I forgot to pay the electric bill. Can you help me handle it?" I froze, not because I was shocked she needed help. That part didn't hurt. But because I realized that the star I'd always seen as untouchable was someone who needed me. Me, the sibling who was supposed to be in the background. And as I listened to her explain the situation, mapping out dates, receipts, and statements, something inside me stirred. A quiet sense that maybe this moment, the one everyone overlooked for years, was the beginning of a new chapter. Not for her, but for both of us. It started slowly, then all at once. After that first phone call, she reached out again. First, it was the electricity bill. Then the credit card. Then something about health insurance forms she couldn't understand. Each time, her voice was slightly more fragile, less polished, less certain. And every time I picked up, not because I wanted some vindication, not because I was keeping score, but because after all those years of being the second thought, the quiet one, I knew what it felt like to be invisible. And I couldn't do that to her, even if part of me wanted to. The strangest part was how the rest of the family reacted. They didn't know she was calling me, not at first. But then, little by little, the calls started to redirect. "Hey, can you talk to your sister about her tax notice? Do you think she's okay? Maybe you could check in." Suddenly, I wasn't the sibling hiding in her shadow. I was the one holding the flashlight, guiding her through terrain she was never taught to navigate. And it became clear, all those years she spent shining, no one ever taught her how to manage when the spotlight went out. There were moments I caught myself resenting the irony. All the times I watched our parents beam with pride at her achievements, the trophies, the speeches, the scholarship letters. And now, I was filling out her paperwork, organizing her bills, helping her budget. No ceremony, no applause, just quiet responsibility. But then I'd hear her say, in a whisper she maybe didn't think I'd catch, "Thank God for you." And in those moments, it didn't matter how the past had felt. What mattered was that I was finally where I was needed, not to perform, but to support, to guide, to steady. One afternoon, after sorting out a missed car payment notice for her, I found myself staring at an old photo on my bookshelf, the two of us at the beach, maybe 10 years old. She's laughing, arms wide open to the sky, the center of the frame. I'm off to the side, half smiling, holding our towels. I remember thinking back then, this is how it will always be. But life has a way of shifting its weight when you least expect it. The phone rang again. It was our mother. "Can you remind your sister to renew her license? She says she's too overwhelmed." I nodded, smiled, and said, "I'll take care of it." Because now, when they need something done right, they don't call the star. They call me. They don't teach you how to be the backup plan. There's no guidebook for being the one people overlook until they can't anymore. I used to think that being invisible was a curse. Now I see it was training. Quiet, painful training. Because when everything started falling apart around her, when the star stopped shining, it wasn't her they leaned on. It was me. And strangely, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Not just from the tasks, the phone calls, the errands, but from carrying the emotional weight of a family that never thought I was strong enough to do any of it. One morning, I sat down with my planner. Yes, I use one, because unlike my sister, I don't assume the world will rearrange itself for me. I started listing everything I was now responsible for. Rent reminders, medical appointments, insurance follow-ups, even explaining how to dispute a charge on her bank statement. Then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote something I hadn't let myself write before. What do I want? Not what they need. Not what she forgot. What do I want? The silence that followed that question in my mind was deafening. The truth is, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to throw everything back in her face. I didn't want to be petty. But I also didn't want to keep pretending that this dynamic didn't cost me something. That every call didn't carry a piece of my childhood. The one where I watched her get praised for being bold while I was told to be more like your sister. Now they wanted me to be the fixer. The dependable one. The adult. And I was. But it wasn't because I was the second best. It was because I'd learned how to survive when no one was watching. That afternoon, I got another call. This time from my aunt. Sweetheart, I just wanted to say thank you for taking care of everything. Your sister's lucky to have you. I almost laughed. Lucky. 4 years, I was invisible. Now I was indispensable. But only because someone else had failed. That's not luck. That's exhaustion wrapped in grace. I thanked her politely and hung up. Then I went to my mirror and looked at myself differently. Maybe I wasn't the star, but I was the axis everything turned on now. And maybe, just maybe, that mattered more. I thought helping her would bring us closer. That maybe, finally, she'd see me not as the quiet sibling, the reliable backup, but as her equal. For a while, it seemed like that might happen. She'd thank me after each call. She'd ask for advice instead of pretending to know it all. She even started showing up to family dinners on time, something she hadn't done since college. But then came the shift, subtle, like a shadow creeping across the floor. A tone in her voice, sharp around the edges. A sigh before asking for help. A strange defensiveness in her posture, as if she was ashamed of needing me, and angry that I was so good at it. It started with small comments. Well, not everyone's wired for spreadsheets and systems, she'd say, half laughing, half stinging. Or, you must love this, finally being the one in charge. I didn't respond at first. I figured she was embarrassed, trying to save face. But as the weeks went by, her pride seemed to morph into something darker. She began to push back, not against the situation, but against me. She'd redo the forms I submitted, question the calls I made, tell our parents I was micromanaging. Suddenly, the help she begged for was framed as interference. The family noticed. My mother called me one evening, confused. Your sister said you were overwhelming her, that you made her feel small. I almost choked on the irony. Small. After years of me being treated like the family's afterthought, I didn't lash out. I just explained the facts. Who called whom? Who missed what payments? Who asked for help? But the truth didn't change the discomfort in my chest. I wasn't trying to prove a point. I was just trying to keep her afloat. But she was drowning, and now she was blaming the lifeboat for being too visible. That's when I realized, some people don't resent being helped. They resent who is helping them. For her, my competence wasn't just unexpected, it was threatening. Because it disrupted the story she built her whole life on, that she was the capable one, the chosen one, the star. And I was supposed to be quiet, supportive, secondary. But here I was, running the show from behind the scenes. And she couldn't stand the reflection that gave her. It wasn't about gratitude anymore. It was about identity. And mine had finally stepped out of her shadow. There's a strange kind of guilt that comes with stepping back, especially when you've been the one holding everything together. But there comes a moment when you realize you're not helping anymore. You're enabling. And no matter how deeply conditioned I was to say yes, to fix things, to soften every blow, I knew I had to stop. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. I wasn't a servant. I wasn't a personal assistant. I was her sister. And if she couldn't see that anymore, then maybe she needed to remember what it was like to manage on her own, even if that meant letting a few things unravel. The first time I let her call go to voicemail, I stared at the phone like it might explode. I'd never done that before. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was thick with anxiety. She left a message. Something about a missed doctor's appointment and needing help with the online portal. I didn't respond. Not immediately. Not the next day. When she finally called again, 3 days later, her voice was sharper, laced with confusion. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. And for the first time, I told the truth. No. But I'm tired. That honesty hit harder than any argument. She paused. Then, in a tone I hadn't heard from her in years, she whispered, "I didn't know." Of course she didn't. How could she? I'd made it look easy, efficient, effortless. I hadn't shown the weight. I hadn't said no. I had stepped up every time she stumbled, and she'd assumed that was just who I was. Maybe it was, but even I had limits. And maybe she needed to find hers. So I told her I wouldn't stop caring, but I couldn't be her crutch forever. She needed to walk again, even if she limped a little at first. She didn't thank me. Not right away, but she didn't fight me either. Over the next few weeks, I noticed the change. She started setting her own reminders, calling the bank herself. Messy, clumsy steps, but steps, nonetheless. The calls didn't stop, but they shifted. Less panic, more sharing. Less reliance, more respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And in that space between her pride and my boundaries, something new began to grow, a real relationship. Not built on hierarchy or roles assigned in childhood, but on truth. Fragile, awkward, overdue truth. The family still talks about her like she's made of stardust. I've come to realize that we'll never change completely. Some narratives are just too deeply carved. They'll always remember her teenage trophies, her college scholarships, her once brilliant smile lighting up the holidays. But now there's a shift, a pause. When something goes wrong, when a decision needs to be made, when someone needs a plan, they don't call the star. They call me. And this time, it's not in secret. It's not whispered or awkward. It's acknowledged, expected, trusted. She's not the same either. There's less flash in her voice, less certainty in her posture, but also oddly more peace. We don't talk about those months, the ones where I took over quietly, then stepped back purposefully. But we both remember them. They're stitched into the rhythm of our calls now. She asks for help less, but when she does, she says please. I don't say yes as quickly, but when I do, it's a choice, not an obligation. It's strange how balance can look like fragility. But maybe that's just what growth looks like when it's real. At a recent family dinner, our cousin raised a toast to the strong women in the family. I turned to her first, of course. She smiled. Then, and I will never forget this, she raised her glass toward me. And to the one who kept us standing. It was brief, quiet, but it cracked something open. I didn't need more than that. I didn't need speeches or standing ovations. I just needed the truth to be spoken, even for a moment. And when it was, I didn't shrink. I smiled back, fully. Finally. She was the star. And maybe, in some ways, she always will be. But stars burn out. Sometimes they vanish entirely. Me. I learned to become the gravity, the axis, the one holding it all in place, silently, steadily. They may not write stories about people like me, but when the lights go out and someone needs to find the way forward, it's me they follow. Not because I shine the brightest, but because I'm still standing, still steady, still here. Months after that family dinner, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name, handwritten. Inside was a copy of a property agreement, the deed to our mother's house. Tucked inside was a note, scribbled in blue ink. It was time to acknowledge who's actually holding this together. Thank you. Signed, my sister. No drama, no frills, no emoji-laced apology. Just recognition. Quiet, legal, and long overdue. I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. Not from relief, but out of something close to reverence. That signature meant more than approval. It was her way of saying, without ever needing to say it, you were right. You were ready. You were always enough. For the first time on paper. For the first time, with value. The calls still come. They still ask for help. But now, there's a difference. Before asking, they ask if they can. It's subtle but powerful. For someone who spent years as the quiet extension of the family's golden child, that's not just respect, that's freedom. The freedom to help by choice, not obligation. The freedom to say no and not be punished for it. No, my name won't ever headline family stories. It's hers they'll always tell at holidays. But mine is the number saved on everyone's phone. Mine is the voice they trust when it all starts to fall apart. And I've made peace with that. Because maybe she was the star, but it was the quiet constellation around her that held up the sky. I used to think I was the backup plan. The safety net. The one you only call when the real star is too busy or too broken to show up. For years, I wore that role like an old coat. Familiar, a little too tight, but better than nothing. But lately, something's changed. Not just in how they see me, but in how I see myself. I'm not just the one who cleans up after the chaos. I'm the one who built something stable in the middle of it. I've started saying no. Not out of anger. Not to make a point. Just because I can. Because my time, my energy, my peace, they matter. And even though they still call, they no longer expect me to fix everything. Some of them are learning to carry their own weight. And the ones who aren't, they've stopped treating my help like a given. I'm no longer the understudy. I'm not standing in the wings, waiting for permission. I'm center stage in my own life, finally. The most surprising part? I don't even need them to admit it. Not out loud. Not anymore. The real victory wasn't them recognizing my value. It was me doing it first. It was me choosing not to measure myself by who gets the spotlight, but by who stays standing when the lights go out. That quiet strength, that's mine. It always was. So let her be the star if she wants. Let the stories keep revolving around her if they must. I'll be here. Not behind her, not below her, but beside her on my own terms. Because I was never the backup. I was the foundation.